It's an incredible journey, this movie, and how it happened. I was working with Larry and Andy on another movie, and they gave me The Matrix, and it was a very astounding concept to actually make this movie. It was, an enormous vision, and they wanted to direct it, which was very troubling at that time because they never directed a picture before. It was a giant movie, and they really felt that they were the only ones who had the vision to bring this story to fruition.
We were fairly confident. The fact that since no one really understood the script, no one else could come in and...
Yeah, basically our first meeting, we went into first Warner Brothers story meeting, and they said, okay, now we know we've bought something cool. We don't know what it is.
Could you just take us through it once?
When I first read that script, I went, wow, am I in the Matrix or am I in the real world? Kind of, how do I get my head around all this?
It took me a lot of readings and a lot of conversations with everybody to fully understand the script.
I have to say I didn't understand the script. I mean, I understood the script well enough to say I liked it, but every time I reread it and every time we got closer, I understood more and more and more and more. I had questions forever, and I would have constantly tried to change their plot, and they were, now, Bill, 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 you just don't understand.
They were not going for something that was razzle-dazzly. They were going for something that was subliminal, and it felt much more right. I mean, it was like, to me, the world's highest financed alternative bizarre movie.
We like the idea of not necessarily recognizing anybody in the first few scenes of the movie. Like when you see Trinity sitting there in the dark hotel room. Again, you don't know who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. Hugo Weaving pulls up and, another face you might not recognize.
The boys always felt that the opening scene of the movie had to kind of grab the audience. They had to grab them in some really incredible way, because there was a lot of dialogue following that scene which would help explain or set up the characters and set up the story. So they really wanted a really exciting moment.
The introduction to Trinity, there's one shot in it that I've always looked forward to, which is the eyeball. When she has her hands, you can see the thought in her eye and the fact that it's really a foreboding shot. You can see the cop coming up this way, and you know something is going to happen to that cop.
I did the first action in the movie, the eagle, which is that thing. I just remember thinking, I mean, they don't really think I'm going to do this stuff, like running sideways along a wall. I was like, well, no, of course I'm not going to do that, and like jumping from one building to another, because everything was really specifically put in the script.
I remember being completely blown away with Carrie Ann's the whole opening sequence, because I hadn't seen any of that, and how powerful that was, and what a great opening that was, and how Trinity worked really well.
And all those leaps, all the running along the wall, months of practice, put her heart into it as she does everything else.
Style-wise, the Heart of the City Hotel was a set that had to be able to be burnt out and have a kind of evoke a mood to it. And of course it's a set which we come back to right at the end of the film from where Neo is killed, and then he's reborn.
There's a lot of work to be done when you're on a wire. It's challenging. And then all of a sudden you kind of like find your way on it, and suddenly you're able to do things that you didn't really think you could do. It's sort of more of your mind getting around it than anything.
Try it.
A little bit changed?
Yep.
In the original script, when she runs across the rooftops, she jumps on a train, which is traveling, through the city, and Agent Smith jumps on the train with her. And I love that. It wasn't a problem that we couldn't afford it. We couldn't find the train in Australia. We couldn't find the, kind of an elevated train. So it would have had to all be visual effects. I mean, if we could have found the train, we could have done it and added just the visual effects of the running and the jumping, but we couldn't do it because we couldn't create it.
First time I met Andy and Larry, I went in to read for this, and I just didn't think in a million years that I would get it. Like it was just another audition that I was going on in between my life, and one of those auditions where you almost feel like it's not even worth going to because it'll go to a name. I mean, that's just how you feel as an actor when you're going out all the time. And so I went in and I did the scenes, and then as I was leaving, they asked me to punch a punching bag. I was like, okay, so I started just wailing on the punching bag, and then they were like, okay, can you kick this? And I was like, well, I have a skirt on and heels, and I said, okay, I'll try, and I held my skirt between my legs, and I just tried to kick. And then as I left, I heard them cheer, after I left the room, or clap or something, and I was like, that can't be for me. That can't be for me. And then they called me back again, and I was like, wow, I could be this girl maybe.
Larry and Andrew said, okay, we'd like you to play Thomas Anderson. I had to read Baudrillard. I had to read Out of Control, which was about systems, evolution, robots. And then there was another book which was Evolutionary Psychology, which is basically emotions and psychology from a Darwinistic point of view. Those were 3 books that they wanted me to read before I even opened up the script, which was fun. I think that they were also asking me to activate some Thomas Anderson thoughts, that kind of questioning, kind of searching.
He feels that there is something that is wrong with the world and he can't figure out what it is. He feels that something's freaking him out and he's trying to figure out the answer. He's a little desperate, that sort of alienated desperation kind of thing.
Well, Thomas is totally alienated. He has a feeling, he has an inkling of something, which is, in the end, turns out to be the Matrix, which sets him apart from everybody else.
Well, I mean, I guess for myself, to play Thomas Anderson, he was searching for the truth to his life. He felt that something was wrong. He felt like he was not having real contact. He was searching for something. He was searching. He felt that there was something behind the veil. And he was looking. So he was looking for Morpheus to try to break that veil. And I guess that is something that Baudrillard spoke about sometimes, but not in searching for something, but in what got in the way.
Baudrillard's ideas of simulacra, simulation, is an important point within the film, and that what we see in the film as a real object is in fact often a simulation.
He does one chapter, I believe, on religious icons, where the icon starts to represent God and it loses its power of a true connection to God, because then you're with the icon and then you have a simulation of an icon until it becomes on the dashboard of your car. A decay of meaning.
You look at a place like Las Vegas where they're building Paris, the
Revels
casino.
in the power of the simulacra is it's very relevant, very modern, important issue that youngsters like us are noodling about.
The scene where my character meets Neo in the nightclub. Well, I always sort of thought that she was a warrior and that she was part of a team of people that had a purpose, and that she would do anything that it took to do that. So that's sort of where I kind of, grabbed into it.
Trinity wore the most bare skin of everybody, so that you had that, the distinct difference between something black and shiny and kind of metallic looking and then somebody's flesh, because she had to have that kind of naive innocence as well for her to be able to connect with Thomas Anderson. Owen and I collaborated a lot on the strength of the tones of green in The Matrix. Also talked with Bill about, when the light hits a certain fabric or a certain leather, or how I could make it pick up green or how I could make it pick up different colours.
The brothers also put in other kinds of archetypes that are traditional in myth. We had the lovers, we had the oracle, we had the guide, and then so those traditional icons of stories which we can relate to and everything around us, and which we tend to help us relate.
The sense of wanting to be free and to not want to fight being controlled, to fight the norm, or to fight the people telling you how things should be. I mean, feeling contained in a box. When I started to realize that those qualities were in the film, it was really pretty heavy for me, because those are really important themes in my life.
Thomas Anderson is not, he's got problems with authority. He doesn't like it. I mean, that's part of what he's questioning. He's a man who's trying to figure out this feeling, his life. There's something wrong. I think he's an alienated person. And he's working in this cubicle, this factory. And he's just lonely and trying to figure things out. He's not a very social person at all. It's not that he doesn't like anybody. It's just, doesn't trust anybody.
Matrix, basically, we wanted to shoot like space. Like there was always space around people. A lot of times it was like about the space, the actual depth of the space around them, the boxes around them, the rooms.
We use wider angles.
And the actual look is like, we wanted sort of, again, to accentuate that space thing. We have like sort of very clean, sparse, every aspect, from the way that we approach shooting each scene, the way we designed each set was sort of designed to sort of help tell that story of the two different places.
He needed to look ill at ease in his clothes, his suit at work, and kind of like someone who'd just woken up. So he was just a little bit disheveled and nothing quite fit him properly.
The brown coat, the brown jacket. Oh, it was fun. We went shopping for that. We went, I remember one of the first experiences I had with her was just going to a flea market, and to an antique kind of flea market, and just walking through it and looking at, because we saw some shapes that worked on me and didn't work. Action! Holy shit. I had charted in this particular picture every scene that I was in, typed out, and just had done every scene that had a key phrase or an image or anything. And so I had literally a chart. So then I would, as I was working over the months, it's just that I could see, okay, this is what this is here. Oh, this is what I'm doing here, and just trying to, so that there was a continuity to it. It would be literally sometimes 3 different places in a day, and it was just, you can't just find the scene, and it had to work in totality of the piece, And so it was just like, okay, that's where I am. This is it, That's before, this is where I am now.
in the same week we'd have a scene where he's supposed to be Neo and he's supposed to be, you know, this kick-ass character, and then a week later we would shoot a scene where he's supposed to be Thomas Anderson, the other persona, and he's supposed to be, you know, smaller, more regular guy, and he would, you know, he would work out and eat and, you know, gain 5 pounds and put on, you know, the pec muscles, and then basically stop eating completely, starve himself, go, you know, lose the weight, lose the definition in the course of a week or two.
Well, I had the benefit in the first of when I was doing the office stuff to be wearing some more clothing, and I could kind of hide my physique a little bit by posture. But wanted to have a, I wanted him to look almost a little fragile, skinny, kind of, you know, sort of, mostly just physically, just trying to have him look fragile, thin, and kind of, you know. I know there was one time that Larry and Andrew just said, "How did you do that?" Because I had to be like skinny, concave Thomas Anderson, and there was another thing where I had to do the same. But I can't recall. I mean, I just remember having chunks of time, like, okay, I've got 2 weeks until I'm fighting. Okay, so I got to start doing different things and do different things. Or I'm starting to get into the coming out of the pod, so I got to lose another 8 pounds or whatever. It's a lot of physical diet, and really letting what the story is doing, where am I in the story, letting that almost help me embody what I have to do.
I like playing villains if they have a sense of humor. And I think that was the key thing with Smith, was that I always thought he was funny. He amused me, and so it was much easier for me to enjoy playing him.
We wanted to subconsciously convey like the idea of a secret agent look, and that kind of 60s silhouette seemed to fit really well. You know, JFK, undercover look seemed to be the right one.
I was actually very excited when we got to do that scene, because I felt for the first time I was actually acting. I was actually involved in something that was gonna extend me, I suppose. Suddenly, after all these months and months of kind of preparing for something, I felt like I was actually involved in it.
To work with Hugo Weaving like that was just, and to see what he was doing as Smith was so fantastic.
We tried to just go for a very neutral accent, but a more specific character. And the character kind of evolved that I wanted him to be not robotic, but not really human, and more like, I kept thinking about a 50s newsreader or someone like that.
It's Walter Cronkite. It sounds like, you know, that's what he said. And that's the way it is, you know? It's so great.
And also, the more I hung out with Larry and Andy, the more I think I picked up on their rhythms. Larry and Andy both have an incredibly deep voice, and I think that kind of Agent Smith started to kind of talk a little bit like that as well.
Somebody said he was imitating us at one point. We fired them.
To play what was going on, that kind of scared, but also kind of the you know, the kind of some of the chutzpah that Thomas Anderson has, you know, fuck you, man, fuck you.
keep getting into this attitude when I do it. Like the guy just turns into this guy. Like, I feel like all of a sudden I feel like I'm like some '70s hippie guy. You know what I mean? I really feel like dude, I turned into that. And then, of course, then to do the special effect and to have the mouth covered for 5 hours. Because I hadn't thought of how I would communicate that day, and all of a sudden I found myself like, kind of trying to find a pen.
What? Some paper? Write faster. We're on the clock here.
He's writing down.
Do I hit, resist, swing at agents? They're pretty mighty.
You're going to help us, Mr. Anderson, whether you want to.
Shut! That was a good day. That was a fun day. Neo wakes up, Thomas Anderson Neo wakes up in that film. I think it's 7 times.
We're very interested in the sort of the concept of consciousness. The whole idea was that, we like cyberpunk fiction. We think, was cool, and the problem with it is that nobody basically knows what cyberspace looks like, or in the end, it's not a very interesting idea. But what's interesting about the whole idea of cyberpunk is that it's a great way to explore things like the nature of reality. But all of the metaphors that sort of happen when you start talking about, the simulation or the falseness of the cyber world disappear when it has no context for the viewer. So we thought that, if you make this world the fake world, then all of those metaphors and all of those things that work in cyberpunk fiction continue to work.
It's an exciting moment for Thomas Anderson. He's meeting the person who he feels will answer the question, which has been gnawing at me. The question is, what is the Matrix? My character feels that the answer to this question will somehow make sense of his life. To make one prop like the bug extractor required not only physically making something that had physical movement and could be utilised in the backseat of a car, but it required also making the image that was to play on the little screen, which is momentarily in the actual film, if you see the bug moving around, where they had to make a puppeted bug, and we shot it in a bathtub with one of the young women in the model department underneath the bath with this glove puppet over her hand moving it around while I sort of shouted instructions like, it's coming to get you, it's going towards your left knee, it's going to your right. Like
a real city. There are sections which are current, like the towers of glass and steel. But as you move out into the suburbs, like in any city, parts of the city have been kind of neglected and forgotten. They've been kind of left behind by the Matrix. Lafayette Hotel was based around a building we found which had been a postal sorting office, and it was about 4 stories high, and it was in a very derelict kind of state. But we felt we could use it as a good exterior for this hotel. So having a general idea of that hotel, we talked to John Gator about being able to extend it, and for one of the shots so it could appear like it was a 13 or 14 story building. And then where Neo is introduced first to Morpheus, where he takes the red pill, is I think on the 13th floor.
When I saw the film, Morpheus scared the shit out of me. I didn't know what he was going to do. He seemed very, very unpredictable, I suppose. There was nothing about him that I could predict. I couldn't predict, you know, whether he was there to help Keanu or whether he was going to kill him.
We prefer stories that you don't know necessarily who's good, who's evil. This is the bad guy, this is the good guy. We think that there's something very scary even about, you know, when you talk about the nature of truth or the idea of knowledge. Those things, I think, can be very scary and very intimidating, and people are afraid of them, and people don't often want to know the truth. And we wanted Morpheus to have that edge to him where you're not sure, you want to hear exactly what he's going to tell you.
Morpheus says, you know, do you believe in fate? And he says, no, I believe in my own life. I don't believe in being in control of my own life. And it just, he becomes this solitary person, and it just starts his responsibilities in a way, or to what he's searching for, what happens, until what happens in the second and third pictures. And it's something that, you know, I always described, and I think Larry and Andrew do as well, as like the reluctant hero.
When I read that scene, that's when I knew I was going to play the part. It was just something about the whole White Rabbit thing and the pills that I just went, oh, I'm playing him.
You wanted Morpheus to be incredibly charismatic and hypnotic and mesmerizing and intimidating, and you know, he does it so much better than you imagine it. It's all those things that you were hoping for, but they're just real and they're there, and it's the magic.
And he's so fantastic in the scene. It's the gesture of the pillbox. You know, again, his phrasing, his physical demeanor, his manner, and you know, he's got quite the build-up. You know, and he's bigger than that. You know, there's a certain larger than life to Lawrence. You know.
There's a couple references to Alice in Wonderland in the movie, and I think that is a brilliant book. And one of the reasons I like it, one of the things that it does is it does describe basically the evolution of a child's consciousness. And she comes into this world, and there are all this craziness, and people just give her things and say, eat this, drink this. and everything affects her and changes her, and she keeps having to just flow and go along with it. And the rules, the Red Queen's race, nothing makes sense. Nothing's logical. It's the way you have to do it, and we tried to do that with the beginning of the film.
This a sequence in which Neo gets coated with liquid mirror. The first thing that happens, the mirror is cracked and the cracks heal up. It's quite a complicated shoot because there's reflections involved in this, which means shooting in the opposite direction so that we've then got an element to put into the mirror or the reflective surface or whatever.
The CG bit is not necessarily a simple matter. It's emulating liquid dynamics is definitely one of the tougher things you can do. We found our way into Mercury, as our basic dynamic, and they did shoot a number of tests, kind of looking at, paint blobbing all over hands and things like that.
At the point where we found Neo's pod, the barcodes were able to match and close. Up until that point, they wouldn't close, and that was how we ended the sequence. So the barcodes closed, we had a black screen, and then suddenly a round circle, and we were through it. Before we actually shot the pod, we had shot it about 7 times, mainly on video, but the special effects guys had to test how their skins broke. The stunt guys had to get inside it to see how the breathing mechanism would work. The prosthetics man had to deal with all of the little pieces the prop guys had made.
Poor Keanu shaved and stuffed into this goop.
Give him another one and let him get on his arm. The thing about that is just people I found when I would have conversations with people, they would be kind of like, and I'd be talking to them and they wouldn't look at me. It's weird.
Originally when they were talking about the power plant and Jeff was in France drawing it and Larry gets the first facts. So it was a lot more scary than he had imagined.
They wanted to look like it was something that get away from that stainless steel, very clean, science fiction-y look, and to make it look, kind of dirty and used and ugly.
With the power plant was an extraordinary thing in that all of the little pieces that went into that, you just couldn't kind of buy them from anywhere. They had to be made. There was a lot of reverse garbage made. There was this fantastic image of like looking in this enormous stage, which looked like a kind of madman's funhouse at this point. And a little further down was a big slippery slide where Neo slides down after he's come through the drain, and then over to the left was a big part of sewer where he falls out of a wall, or a stuntman falls out of a wall. So it was a big sort of kind of swimming pool thing there, and it really was a kind of bizarre sight to see it.
We were shooting the end of the movie, and he had lost a lot of weight, and he shed another 15 pounds just for the end of the pod sequence there.
I mean, I wanted to look very, emaciated when I came out of the pod and when I'm on the table to recovery. And I think we got the effect there pretty good. We've sort of fallen back a great deal into, and utilised, as Larry and Andy wanted us to do, a lot of Jeff Darrow's drawings, which were the original conceptual thing. The case of turning a lot of Jeff's fantastic ideas into reality have meant some adaptations to, because we deal with gravity and not just a piece of paper. But essentially we're trying to sort of evoke that sort of world that he's developed, which is kind of cool. In the real world, it's not machine-made, it's human-made. They've taken all the old machines that have died out and humanized them. But you also want to concentrate more on the human thing, so your lenses become longer and narrower. Moves are more organic. They're not mechanical moves meant to show an action. You're meant to follow actors around acting their hearts out.
In the Neb, we wanted it to be much more about the human beings, and so we used, you know, longer lenses and sort of let the backgrounds get all sort of soft and have the humans stand out more.
Their clothing is a little more humane and cloth-like, and their makeup is more natural, their hair is more natural. They're less styled.
It was a very hand-hewn world as opposed to the Matrix. Also, they're a mercenary group of people, so they have more on their minds than fashion, you know.
I remember everyone was excited to walk on the Neb, the Nebuchadnezzar. That was really a cool day.
In the Neb, it's crawling with sort of Jeff Darrow sort of technology, which almost has this organic quality. It's this sort of industrially gadgety jungle, cables and everything.
You know, it's built long before the movie takes place, so it's an old ship. It's been around forever. It's just kind of been held together by the loving care of the crew.
I just wanted to look old and put together and not, you know, not Star Trek-y where they're all components. It had to look like it was, they're constantly putting it back together and using pieces from this and that.
They really tried to bring the guts of the spaceship, if you like, out into the spaceship as opposed to burying it behind the sort of normal vac form sort of style thing that you might see in a lot of spaceships. Everything is considered. Even the wires in the Neb, there was, you know, the blue and red wires, arteries and veins, you know, representative of this kind of, you know, living tissue in this steel ectoskeleton, you know. That marriage of machine and man everywhere in the picture, everywhere. There's a lot of work been gone into buying various old dentist chairs from the 1920s, which we have taken ideas from for making the ecto chairs.
And take it right down to the ground, please.
And I loved the chairs, and I loved, you know, the whole, the brutalness of that needle that goes in your head, you know, the crudeness of it. Well, the construct is the idea that it's neither in the real world or the Matrix itself. It's a kind of, in my mind, it was always kind of a parallel hard drive.
And it was a mechanism for explaining to the audience, if you like, what the Matrix really was and how it had affected the world. We talked about various things of it just being a white limbo, or perhaps it would have an illuminated floor. But because of the various things that kind of had to happen in there, in the end it was basically just a white floor. I think you'd remember there were 2 red chairs in it at one point, which were the chairs from the Lafayette Hotel, which was to kind of illustrate the point that this was an illusion as well. And in the construct you could build things like the dojo. The dojo was in the construct, which was not, you know, even though it is in the computer world, it wasn't the Matrix.
Even when we were doing those scenes, like when I'm leading him through those training programs and explaining to him how, you know, anybody inside the Matrix could be used as an agent, and explaining to him how, you know, human beings have come to be used as a power source for machines. Even in explaining all of that, you know, I never thought of it as explaining things to the audience, even though I know that that's part of Morpheus's role in the film.
It's a heavily expository script. I mean, when you're trying to set up a world like that, you know,
Well, it's also super dense in terms of the images that come like right on top of all these sort of complicated ideas. You get another like incredibly dense visual thing, and it becomes difficult for people to hold on to, you know, where they are exactly, especially when you're talking about reality. And we wrote the script in a way that we were trying to, you know, we weren't telling people, you know, at this point we are here. You know, we wrote the script the way that we wanted to sort of feel in the film. And
there are only a handful of really decent science fiction movies that are somewhat extreme and scary and or shocking, because there's these social issues that are real, like buttons, big buttons. And you know, that was evident in their script, that there were like huge buttons that they were pushing, you know, the fetus fields concepts and things like that, that were not like your fantasy effects movies, or, you know, happy-go-lucky. Okay, the ending is like gentle enough for a 12-year-old to handle or 11-year-old to handle. These guys were writing rated R science fiction. Science fiction is not necessarily like soft fiction. So, you know, that was evident right away.
When I read Matrix, as I said, I was really taken with the idea of a situation where there was a real world and then a world that was created within your mind, and that human beings are kind of used as batteries. It was a really, really frightening kind of concept.
First, there's a nervous breakdown, shock of reality, and it was fun to act. Fun to act.
What I try to do is basically find little ways, you know, to inject some other colors into Morpheus's character. And basically, essentially, I tried to make him softer and much more of a nurturer as opposed to a father. You know, the masculine side of Morpheus is really evident in The Matrix, and his feminine side is evident in the Neb. I wanted him to feel like a den mother almost.
He is this like fevered missionary guy. He's like
He's a zealot.
A zealot, basically. And likewise, we think there is something dangerous about people who believe they have the truth, and they do sort of act blindly. And we tried to give Morpheus some of that too.
I understand their point of view in that there's a part of him that's a zealot and all of that. But even if he is, he can't think of himself that way. So no matter how many times I hear it, I'm always going, well, what do you mean? He's not a zealot. It's clear. The man is the one. You know?
If the brothers mentioned Baudrillard, most actors would draw a blank. Keanu's read it. In that sense, he's like Thomas Anderson. He's quiet, like Thomas, but there's something going on underneath there. And the expertise, the ease with which Thomas is the one is also the ease that Keanu brings to it. There's a lot of hard work behind it, but he makes it look pretty easy.
Keanu has a quality that is incredibly magnetic and charismatic. He is someone that it seems as if the camera kind of goes inside and brings up his essence. And it's something that he can't even hide.
This role basically required a maniac, a lunatic.
Yeah. As soon as you take away the mania that he brought as an actor to the movie, you don't get the kung fu looking as cool as it could. You don't get Neo coming out of the pod and being emaciated as if his body has been in suspended animation for 30 years.
He is a perfectionist, and he felt that there was something special about the whole experience, the whole picture, the whole everything, and he wanted to get it as right as possible, and we loved him for it.
Larry and Andy kept saying to me, we want the actors to actually be able to do the kung fu. We want them to do it. I would say to them, what's the big deal? Let's get the people who can do the kung fu. But the boys were convinced that they wanted to see these actors doing those things themselves.
Actors always bring more to believability of it than a stunt person is, no matter how good they are. If you can raise the actors up to the level of the stunt people in the action, then you've got the best of both worlds.
We're hoping to shoot the kung fu the way that Hong Kong guys do, which is to have the real actors exchange 4, 5, 6 punches, to choreograph the fight like a dance, let it sort of happen in front of people instead of just creating it in the editing process. And that required all of the actors, all the 4 major actors anyway, to undergo some massively intense study with, we think, one of the best Hong Kong choreographers, Yun Wu Ping.
The idea was a traditional Japanese style building, or at least that influence, set up for fighting. The dojo, in fact, had been built well before we actually were going to shoot. And because of the injury to Keanu Reeves' neck, we couldn't actually film that set. So the actors had rehearsed in it for about a month beforehand.
We did 21 takes of the 3 kicks. Keanu goes up, kicks me 3 times. And that was partly because he hadn't been up in a wire in a long time. There was no rehearsal time for him to go up.
Good kick, right? Bad hands. Yeah.
There needed to be a lot of room for Morpheus to be able to do this extraordinary kind of eagle flying kind of kick. And they used a heck of a lot of light in it.
Incredible amount of light, high-speed cameras. There's this great moment Lawrence had in the dojo scene where he comes over to Keanu after he's sort of knocked him back. And we could tell that Lawrence was, by God, he was into this thing. He starts coming at him.
Yeah, his body he's leaving from the spot that I'm stepping to make the sweep.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a sequence where I fly over him, do a backflip, and land in front of him, and he turns and hits me. I got a pretty good sternum shot there.
The most surprising thing was that we hurt each other a little bit. You know, we bruised each other up pretty badly.
When we were training, you had no contact, or you'd have light contact. And then there were certain moments where you had to have more power.
You know, we weren't pulling. You know, we had been practicing these movements for like 8 months, but we hadn't really gone full out until I think we got there. I was surprised by what happens when you smash forearms with somebody that hard, that often.
After the kung fu, the dojo scene, Lawrence and Keanu were both just covered in bruises and scrapes and burns from the tatami mats. And
後尾再訓練嘅時候，我感覺到有少少問題，我再執佢，再改佢。師傅教徒弟訓練，即係打，就發出啲啪啪練功，即係教功夫打到好傷嘅咁。我改咗啲少少，到面口停，即係唔會打落去㗎嘛。將啲少少嘅嗰啲訓，好似有啲訓練嘅感覺去嘅。
We were always concerned about the dojo scene. I was concerned they were going to get hurt. They thought they were going to do full contact. They'd kill each other.
You could tell the actors are totally into it.
I love the pace of the movie. I love the fact that it just is relentless. I feel even the dialogue scenes are relentless. It just never stops hammering. It's always coming up with something new. It doesn't take rests. The rests are more built in to greater story arcs than they are individual scenes. I think I understood that, tuned into that, and took advantage of it in a way that you don't ever stop the physical action in the movie. You let the movie's pace work in the way that you would traditionally try to slow stuff down editorially. The material on this movie was so cuttable.
the Switch character was meant to be feminine in The Matrix, and she was a guy in the real world and stuff like that. And they decided to take that out because they felt it might confuse the audience some more. You know, they had said that they wanted us all to be, you know, smaller in the real world. So I just kind of went, well, okay, I'm gonna like sort of play up this sort of nurturing, maternal side of the character. It feels like, you know, it feels like that when you watch it.
The thing that I love about Trinity is that I'm portraying someone who's really, really strong and who has a real mission and a real purpose and has been fighting for this purpose for most of her life. Yet, I don't think that she's lost being a woman. Even though there's no room to be a woman, she still is, and I really liked that in the script. She still has a lot of compassion and empathy and love, and because of the love that my character has for Keanu, ends up really giving him the faith to do something pretty spectacular.
I had an idea when the sequence with the cat, where you see the cat twice and they talk about deja vu. So we decided to include that in the scene near the fountain to continue that idea of the Matrix was glitching. So we cast a lot of twins and triplets as where we could and then costumed them identically. And I don't know if many people would notice it, but we thought it was a good idea.
Okay. You want to put some twins in this? I've got twins over there. I mean, how many twins do you want in here? Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you watching The Woman in Red?
So you liked this better than anything, or nothing? Freezer. Just freezer. We'll try it clean and naked.
We shot the crowd being comprised of hundreds of twins, and had them walking about in various patterns, and shot them with multiple cameras at high frame rates so that later in post-production we could slow them down to nothing. Then we went on a green screen stage and we mapped out the agent's proximity and the proximity of Morpheus and Keanu, and shot those separate from one another. So the agent was also shot with a high-speed camera so he could be frozen, freeze the frame, and then Morpheus could act around a representation of his shape, a little C-stand we used. And so, you know, cameras were matched on stage to that which was out on location.
The Neb is meant to look like, it's not really a spaceship, it's an inner ship, it's a sewer ship, if anything. It's meant to look like human beings, after they freed themselves from the pods, that took the detritus of an abandoned society and stuck it all together and make it work. So it is the lost and found, it's the odds and ends, it's the whole Earth catalog of spaceships. It's not designed as much as collected. It's just a dirty, crude, man-made apparatus that gets them from A to B. because in the script, the sun has been blotted out. You're not in a warm world, you're in a very cold world. When their power dies in the Nebuchadnezzar, the world becomes freezing. There was a scene we never quite got correct where they're hiding, waiting for the squiddies to go by, and they're supposed to see their breath on the glass. We never got it right. They're supposed to wipe their breath off the glass, but never quite got it. You see the lights go out, and you see them get cold, and you see Lawrence put his hat on, but it never really saw their breath quite well.
We've got a lot of visual sort of graphics that have to be produced to go on the screens around that sort of central area. And we've got tanks positioned where there's about another 22 screens. It's all part of like telling the story of what's actually happening. A lot of them have to be sort of interactive, if you like. You've got to go from where, all I can see is a blonde or a brunette walking down a street, and anticipating what looks like matrix code running on the screens. At the same time, when you sort of hear that dialogue, you don't want to be able to recognise the blonde or the brunette walking down the street, but you do want to have a sense of that something is actually happening, or if he's turning left and he's going to go right, you've got to follow him. You want to be able to sort of, like, in a sense, travel within those screens.
Cypher is a guy who's been involved with Morpheus, I'd say, in the last 14 years, maybe came from another ship. Was a strong disciple of Morpheus. But now I've had second thoughts at the beginning of this movie, and I truly believe that it's really survival of the fittest, and that I need to make a drastic change in order to survive the path that he's planning on taking us all to. So I basically sell my soul for the bag of gold in the end, thinking that it's the right decision, because I believe that Neo is not the one, and there's a lot of sibling rivalry that I feel.
Thank the baby Jesus for Joe Pants. It's an expression. Scorsese, it's got De Niro. Coen Brothers got De Turo. We got Joe Pantoliano. He is the ultimate individual, and what happens? He gets killed. So what we're saying is, you can be an individual, but you better have superpowers, because otherwise you'll get killed.
Well, the real world is a place where there's not a lot of resources available. And what resources are available are made by the people. So, for example, maybe they hydroponically grow hemp or some other flax or something that they then mill and turn into their own fabric and weave, and it's kind of a very ancient technology. Even though they're technologically advanced, they don't have anything that they can utilize to build fabric with, apart from old methods. So we kept to natural fibers and raw fabrics and really simple shapes so that, you know, you would believe that a population like that would have made clothes in a simplistic way.
You know, the kind of almost Eastern Tibetan kind of, you know, blanket, that kind of priest or monkish aspect to it.
Wardrobe is infused with blue. What looks white is actually blue. Everything is infused with blue. Your light's slightly cooler, tiny bit, because you don't have to do it much because the art direction does it for you.
And the ships are cold places compared to Zion, so, you know, they add many layers and they have old clothes that have been handed down through the ship's generations that people just get issued when they get a posting on the ship. The idea was that when you jacked in, the image of yourself that was seen in the Matrix was actually a projected image of yourself, in that we saw everybody's real selves inside the ship. The self that gave them confidence to enter the world and do what they did was the image that we saw in the Matrix.
Keanu's first trip back to the Matrix. This is Keanu. Once the veil has been lifted from his eyes, the first time back in the Matrix. That's his trip in that car through Chinatown. And I feel like it should be reality. It should look like reality, but it should be fake. The thing that used to convince him before he was told the truth, it now looks remarkably fake. So green screen is too sophisticated a technique. We can make it look real. So I wanted to use something as fake as Hitchcock's old rear screen projection. The same way, you know, Cary Grant looks fake driving down the street in North by Northwest.
They got a pretty cool quality out of it.